Now, here's Michael Smerconish.
Hey, it's time for a linguistic change. We're no longer dealing with vaccine hesitancy. It's now vaccine denial. So argues Dr. Niambi M, Associate Professor and Director of Graduate Studies in the Department of Political Science at Howard University. Also, by the way, author of the book, American While Black, in a great opinion piece posted right now at Smerconish.com and also in all of my social media. Dr. Carter, thanks so much for being here. Make the case. Why is it time to move on and now regard these folks as being involved in denial and not hesitancy?
Look, it's not to suggest that there could be no one out here who is not uncertain, but I think the linguistic change is important because we keep treating this as if it's just an informational hurdle, right? If we just give people more facts, then they will see the light and then become vaccinated or wish to become vaccinated. But the information has been out there for months. Everyone from the American Medical Association to the Centers for Disease Control have mythbusters and all these things out there, yet you still see a sort of dedicated minority of the American population that says, I don't want to take the vaccine, or I'll wait and see. And what are we waiting and seeing about? I think acknowledging and grappling with the fact that there are just some people who won't be vaccinated, regardless of the information they have, helps us sort of reorient ourselves a bit instead of treating this like an informational deficit of some sort.
In other words, we're showing them too much deference. We're treating them as if they are undecided voters, when in fact they know how they're voting and they're intransigent in their approach. They're not going to shift for any reason.
Exactly. And I think if you look from everything from the latest research, whether it's the Kaiser Family Foundation and others, it demonstrates that there are people who are just not going to be vaccinated. Now, there are real people with hurdles to vaccination in some cases. Maybe if you live in a rural community, maybe if you are an hourly employee, so taking the time off. But for the most part, the vaccine has not only been proven to be safe over and over again, it's also freely available. And so cost is no longer a factor. Information is no longer a barrier, right? I mean, I think the medical community has tried to be as transparent as it can be about the vaccine, about its development, et cetera. Yet you still have people saying, I'm not taking it. And that's not hesitance, that's out and out refusal.
Okay, so I totally buy into what you're saying. I agree that if you've not been vaccinated by now, you have no intention of getting vaccinated. I want those folks to get vaccinated. Is this the best way to reach them? In other words, what will be the ramifications if we do what you say and we change up the way we refer to the people we're talking about?
Well, look, this is not about shaming people. This is not about telling people you must do this or else, right? It's not that. But I think if we keep treating this as, well, people are just unsure, right? Then we're going to keep getting the same result, which is this stalwart portion of the country that will not get vaccinated. So I don't know what the magic language will be, right? Because there's so much misinformation and people tend to go to the sources that confirm what they already believe, even if those beliefs are wrong, right? So there's really no way to sort of get into that space unless you have a lot of coordination by these same media outlets that people go to that reaffirm their beliefs, unless you can sort of get to maybe some of those hosts and others who continuously tell people, you don't have to trust the government. And let's be clear, this didn't just start today with this vaccine. I think that, you don't have a lot of luxury in an op-ed to say all the things, but I think it's clear that we have sort of been trending this way, playing fast and loose with language like alternative facts, which are just lies, right? In many cases. And, so we're not going to solve it in this one moment, but here we are in a moment where the public health crisis is dire, and we are reaping sort of what we've sown over the last, I would say, decade or so, sort of even longer, by sort of diminishing trust in our institutions.
So let's go back further than that, because something that you wrote that I was very interested in, you said the anti-vaccine and anti-masking stances we have seen with respect to COVID-19 are not the way Americans have typically dealt with pandemics. How were these things handled in the past?
Well, I mean, look, we have two sort of, or several, right, great sort of examples of this. So there was polio. There have been outbreaks of polio. Summer was a time of great concern for many individuals. I mean, we still have polio survivors who are still dependent, right, on iron lungs and other things to assist with their breathing, who unfortunately didn't have an opportunity to take a vaccine. And I think when we were dealing with polio, I mean, there was sort of, I think, a united approach that the virus is the thing that is the threat, not your government institutions, not your medical institutions. And so you saw people, you know, famous people getting the vaccine, right? You saw people clamoring, right, to get their children vaccinated, because we know that viruses like polio and other kinds of childhood illnesses that many of us inoculated against were the number one killers of children. So I think what we saw then was, one, we had a much more closed media environment. There were only so many networks to get your information. And those places were speaking with one voice. And then you had, I think, a public that really understood what it looks like to see children and loved ones die or be long-term injured from these childhood illnesses. And so when that vaccine became available, people were lining up to get that vaccine. So by the middle of the century, right, we have moved away from polio as being really even in existence in this country, right? Because people were being inoculated against polio. And I think, you know, those are things that we should remember, because I think we treat these kinds of questions as if they've always been up for debate, and they haven't.
You remind me, and perhaps, Doctor, you've seen the data I'm going to refer to, that Kaiser Health had a survey that came out just a couple of days ago, and I've talked about it on radio, where they asked a cross section whether they believed 8 statements. All of them were false about the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And then they went back and they took a look at where the people who were responding received their news and what they thought were the most trusted news sources. And they used the word correlation. I use the word causation, but they noted a correlation between those who were getting information from Newsmax, One American News, or Fox News were more apt to believe false statements about the pandemic. So let me bring this back to you, because you're saying, let's call it what it is. These are not people who are on the fence. These are people who are locked in. But where they go to get their news, they're probably not up for the linguistic or semantic change that you're looking for. So how do we reach them?
Well, I mean, I think this is the problem, right, with the proliferation of news sources. So you talked about, you know, Fox and One News and all these places. And we have this really balkanized media environment, and it mimics the partisan balkanization that we see. So, you know, it would be great if all the news agencies, regardless of their partisan or ideological leanings, could just get on one page about medical information, right? Because public health should not be partisan. I mean, if we're just being honest, this should not be a place to gain political points. We should all be in agreement that there's this virus here that is dangerous, that is killing millions of people worldwide and has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans, not to mention the long-term COVID injured, right? And this is the way that we can all live better, protect ourselves, protect our loved ones, the most vulnerable. In a perfect world, all the news media outlets will be saying the same thing. But we recognize that we can politicize this issue like we can politicize everything from infrastructure, you know, to what you were just talking about in the previous segment about sort of human rights violations and how we recompense for those. So I think it's unfortunate, but I don't know that there is a way that you can reach people by media organization, because if I know that I can turn on Fox, I don't have to go to CNN or even my local news source. And Fox will tell me what I already believe is true, because we know that people don't like information that conflicts with their beliefs. They just seek out more information that confirms what they already believe. I don't know if there is a way, but I think recognizing that maybe there is not a way to change people's minds is a way forward, because then you can pivot and figure out, okay, so how can we keep the majority of us safe? What other ways might we be able to keep even those people who want to be unvaccinated safe? Because they're more likely to die. They're more likely to contract COVID than their vaccinated peers. So I do think that acknowledging their resistance means that we also have to think about new ways to keep those folks safe as well, because they are still, fellow Americans, and we have an investment in their health and their safety as well.
So here's what I hear Dr. Niambi Carter from Howard saying. I'll put it in my language. We are spinning our wheels. The more we are thinking that there are some folks among us who are vax hesitant. They're not. They are vax deniers or vax obstinate. We're not going to convince them. So let's get real and figure out, how do we now approach these dynamics? Stop thinking you're going to win them over, because that day has passed. Am I getting the right message?
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And I think doing that presents other opportunities. Maybe we can be more creative about how we do this. And I think, the more that the people say, you have to be vaccinated, that makes them dig in their heels even more. Because because if part of my identity is sort of being contrarian and, questioning these forces that are saying that I have to be vaccinated, I have to social distance, I have to mask, then just sort of saying you have to be vaccinated is not going to work. And even explaining to people that this vaccine doesn't damage your fertility or make you magnetic or change your DNA is not going to be enough to turn people into vaccine getters, right? So if we know that, then we can move differently, I think. I think it frees up a lot of space to be thoughtful about how we move forward, because we're going to have to, right? Or we'll just be here for a much longer period of time.
Very provocative and makes a lot of sense to me. Dr. Niambi Carter, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael, for having me.